Have you ever noticed that most gardens grow the same flowers? Roses, peonies, gladiolus, perennial phlox. It's classic, of course, but sometimes it gets boring. Do you know that there are amazing plants that gardeners seem to deliberately avoid? And it's not because they're difficult or bad. Quite the opposite. These are simply very, very underestimated flowers. Today I'll tell you about 3 such wonders. Plants that deserve to be in every garden, but for some reason people are hesitant to recommend them. After this video, you'll definitely want to plant at least one of them. Promise. Imagine a flower bed that blooms from midsummer to autumn without fuss and fluctuations. Imagine plants that attract butterflies and bees, that last in a vase for 2 or 3 weeks, that grow in difficult places where other flowers refuse to grow. Imagine simplicity in care and beauty that doesn't require constant attention. Is this real? Yes. And these are our 3 secret flowers. But first, let's figure out why these plants remain in the shadows. Why do gardeners hide them? Right, they're simply not well known. You don't often see them in garden centers in the most visible places. People don't rush to buy them during the first days of the season. There aren't thousands of videos about them on the internet. But that's precisely what makes them truly interesting. If you plant them in your garden, it will immediately stand out from your neighbors. You'll get attention, questions, requests to show these beauties to friends. Let's meet our hidden treasures. Liatris spicata, say this word slowly, liatris. A beautiful word for a beautiful flower. And you know what's funny? When people first see liatris in a flower bed, they often say, "Wow, what kind of magic is this?" Because liatris looks nothing like the flowers we're used to. Imagine a tall stem, from 24 to 36 inches tall. Maybe even taller, if it's a tall-growing variety. And on this stem is a long, narrow, unusually shaped flower that looks like a neat wand or spire. The flowers in the inflorescence are arranged tightly together, and they bloom in an unusual way. Know how? Not from bottom to top, like most flowers. No, liatris blooms from top to bottom. This creates an effect of little flames that light up one after another, cascading down the stem. That's where the second name comes from, blazing star or fiery star. The color of liatris is another one of its features. Of course, there's the classic light pink and white, but there are also luxurious deep purple and violet shades that look absolutely regal. There are red and carmine varieties. There are even bicolor cultivars. Now the main question, why don't gardeners rush to get liatris? There are several reasons. The first is simple ignorance. Many people simply haven't encountered this plant. They walk through garden centers and see familiar flowers. Roses, tulips, daisies. And liatris stands off to the side modestly and is often overlooked. The second reason is prejudice. Some gardeners think that if a flower has an unusual shape, it must be difficult to grow. Or they think, well, this is a flower for cut arrangements, but in the garden it will look strange. This is a very common mistake. In fact, liatris looks stunning in the garden. It adds vertical lines, dynamics, movement to the flower bed. It looks like nothing else, and that's its main advantage. The third reason is stereotypes about its being demanding. Someone once said that liatris loves dry places and needs special care, and this stays in memory. In reality, it's one of the most unpretentious perennial plants. If you have a place with good drainage and sun, liatris will grow by itself without your interference. Let's talk about growing it. Liatris can be planted in both spring and fall. If you're buying corms or tubers, it's best to do this in early spring or early fall. If it's a seedling in a pot, you can plant it throughout the season, except during extreme heat. Choice of location, that's the main thing. Liatris loves the sun. Full sun, no less than 6 to 8 hours a day. In such places, it will bloom more abundantly and the flowers will be brighter. Can grow in partial shade, but flowering will be less lush. Soil not critical. Liatris grows in any soil, but prefers slightly acidic or neutral. If you have very alkaline soil, you can add peat when planting. The main thing is good drainage. Liatris doesn't like waterlogged places. If water stands on the site, even in spring, liatris will start to rot. So if you have a wet area, make a raised bed or simply plant liatris on a small mound. When planting, the distance between plants should be about 12 inches. This is not too far and not too close. With such planting, plants will be well ventilated, but at the same time will create a dense, beautiful group. As for watering, in the first year after planting, water regularly so the soil is slightly moist. Once the plant is established and starts growing actively, it becomes more drought-tolerant. An adult liatris can be watered less frequently. Of course, in very hot and dry summers, it's worth helping it with watering. Fertilizing. Liatris isn't very demanding when it comes to feeding. If the soil is at least somewhat fertile, it will grow beautifully. In spring, you can give it a balanced fertilizer for perennials, and that will be enough. If you overdo it with nitrogen fertilizers, liatris might spend all its energy on leaves and flower less. Here's another important thing. Liatris is a perennial, and each year it will become more beautiful. It starts modestly with 1 or 2 stems, but after 2 or 3 years, the bush spreads out, and you get several flower stems. Power. After flowering, if you want to prevent the plant from self-seeding, cut off the spent inflorescences. But you can leave them. Liatris self-seeding is usually not a problem, though new plants may not be exactly the same as the mother plant, especially if it was a double variety. In fall, don't rush to cut the stems completely. They'll look decorative even in dried form. Only cut liatris completely in spring when new growth begins to appear. Where to plant liatris? It's a very versatile plant. You can plant it in mixed borders, where it will serve as background and add structure. You can grow it in groups in the company of other perennials. A classic combination is liatris with coneflower and black-eyed Susan. This combo blooms for a long time and looks very natural and beautiful. Liatris works great when combined with summer annuals. For example, plant low-growing flowers like petunias or verbena at its base. You get a nice layer. Or plant it next to ornamental grasses. The green background will emphasize the neat liatris wands. In a vase, liatris lasts 2 to 3 weeks, maybe even longer. And as the lower flowers fade, the upper ones continue to bloom. It's very beautiful in a vase. Here's another thing many don't know. Liatris attracts butterflies. If you care about insects and want to help pollinators, liatris is for you. Butterflies literally swarm over its flowers. Liatris varieties? There are dwarf ones like cobalt, about 16 inches tall, perfect for the front. There are tall ones like Floriston Violet, over 32 inches. There are unusual varieties like Alba with white flowers or the double Winchester Cold with a modest yellowish tint. And you know what's cool? Liatris lives a very long time. With proper care, one bush can grow in a garden for 10 to 15 years. It's not an annual that needs replanting every year. It's a reliable, faithful plant that year after year will delight you with its unusual blooming. Verbena bonariensis. If liatris is flames, then Verbena bonariensis is airiness and elegance. It's one of the most beautiful plants that exists, and yet almost no one talks about it. Imagine a plant 36 to 48 inches tall, or even taller, with very thin, spiderweb-like stems. On these almost invisible stems sit small, narrow leaflets. And at the very top, huge clouds of tiny purple or pink-purple flowers, gathered in flat inflorescences. It seems like the air itself has frozen into flowers. Pure magic. Verbena bonariensis is a tall, thin, very graceful plant. When you see it for the first time in a flower bed, it seems like this is not the familiar verbena we know. And indeed, if you've grown regular verbena, low, dense, with flowers tightly pressed together, then bonariensis is a completely different story. Why don't gardeners take Verbena bonariensis? The first reason is that it's less well known. When people say verbena, most imagine the low verbena that blooms in pink, white, and red. Not many know that this tall, airy variety exists. The second reason is that it seems delicate and requires special care. These thin stems, it seems like they'll break in the wind. In fact, the stems of Verbena bonariensis are very flexible and strong. The wind won't break them, it will just make them sway, creating that very airiness. The third reason is not knowing how to use it in the garden. Many think, this is for bouquets. And yes, it's excellent in cut arrangements. But in the garden, it's no less beautiful. Let's talk about growing it. Verbena bonariensis is a plant that can be either an annual or a perennial, depending on your climate. In warm regions, it survives winter and grows as a perennial. In cold regions, it often freezes and is grown as an annual. But this isn't a problem, because it easily grows from seed. Seeding is best done in late February or March, indoors, to get strong seedlings by the time of planting outdoors. Verbena seeds are very small, so sow them on the soil surface and press them slightly. Don't cover them with soil. Light is needed for germination. The seeds germinate slowly, perhaps 2 to 3 weeks. Be patient. When the first leaves appear, make sure the seedlings get enough light. If there's not enough light, they'll start stretching and become thin. You can plant seedlings in open ground when the danger of frost passes and the soil warms up. Verbena is heat-loving, so there's no need to rush. The location for Verbena bonariensis is sunny. Full sun, without question. In partial shade it will grow, but will bloom less, and may lose the airiness that characterizes it. Soil can be anything, even not very fertile. Verbena doesn't require special care in this regard. The main thing is good drainage. If the soil is heavy, clayey, add sand when planting. Watering moderate. After planting, water regularly so the plant roots well. Then watering can be reduced. Verbena is quite drought tolerant. In hot, dry summers, of course, water. But if there's been rain, additional watering may not be necessary. Fertilizing carefully. If you give verbena too much nitrogen fertilizer, it might spend all its energy on leaves and flowering will be weak. It's best to use a balanced fertilizer for flowering plants or a fertilizer with higher phosphorus content. Feed once or twice during the season. That will be enough. Pruning. Here's an interesting point. If you want verbena to be bushier and bloom more abundantly, when the plant reaches a height of about 8 to 12 inches, pinch the top. This stimulates branching. After such pinching, the plant will become more branched. After flowering, you can cut off spent inflorescences to stimulate new flowers. This is especially effective in summer. Where to use Verbena bonariensis? That's where all its magic unfolds. First, it's the perfect plant for adding height and airiness to mixed flower beds. If you have dense, squat plants, verbena on top creates a light, airy layer. It's like adding an invisible curtain of flowers. Second, verbena looks great in the company of other plants. For example, planted among roses or peonies. Its thin stems won't compete with large flowers, but instead create a beautiful background. Third, verbena is wonderful in bouquets. Cut several stems on a day when the flowers are already open but don't yet look tired, and put them in a vase. Such a bouquet lasts a long time, 2 to 3 weeks or even longer. Fourth, Verbena bonariensis attracts pollinators. Butterflies often sit on it. Bees buzz around. If you care about insects, this plant is for you. Varieties. The main color of Verbena bonariensis is purple or light violet. That's its characteristic color. There are varieties with more saturated purple tones, some with lighter ones. There are rare pink varieties, but in all cases it's an airy, elegant sight. Here's what you need to know. Verbena bonariensis can self-seed. If you let it mature seeds, the following year you may get young plants in various places in the garden. This can be a plus or a minus, depending on your vision. If you're happy with it appearing in different spots, it saves effort. If you want order, cut off spent inflorescences before they produce seeds. And one more thing, Verbena bonariensis blooms for a very long time. It starts blooming in early summer and continues until the first frosts. It's one of the longest blooming periods among all the flowers you can grow. Astilbe. If Liatris is fire and Verbena is air, then Astilbe is grace and tenderness. But here's the paradox. Astilbe is one of the most unpretentious plants, and yet many gardeners are afraid of it and won't take it. Why? Because they think Astilbe is only for shady places, that it requires special care, that it's temperamental. In reality, Astilbe is one of the most rewarding plants in the garden. Let's start from the beginning. Astilbe is a perennial plant that grows into a bush 12 to 36 inches tall. Depending on the variety, Astilbe has two main advantages: beautiful foliage and beautiful flowers. Astilbe foliage is lacy, feathery, resembling fern leaves. The color of the leaves is a whole subject. Usually the leaves are green, but there are varieties with bronze, reddish, or even dark burgundy leaves. Atropurpurea, for example, has leaves that look absolutely regal, in a rich dark color. Even if astilbe doesn't bloom, its foliage decorates the garden. Astilbe flowers are gathered in long, fluffy plumes. When the plume opens, you get a cloud made up of thousands of tiny flowers. Colors vary: white, pink, red, crimson. Even some varieties have an orange tint. And all these flowers are very delicate, airy, creating a sense of lightness. Why are people afraid of astilbe? The first reason is the belief that it grows only in shade. In reality, this isn't quite true. Astilbe can grow in shade, partial shade, and even in sun. Of course, it depends on the variety and climate. In hot regions, astilbe prefers partial shade or shade. In cooler regions, it can grow in the sun. The second reason is the seeming requirement for moisture. Many think that astilbe needs constantly wet soil, almost swampy. In reality, astilbe prefers moist soil, but not waterlogged. There's a big difference between moist and wet. The third reason is not knowing how to use it. Many think astilbe is a plant exclusively for shady corners, for hidden places. Yes, you can use it that way, but you can also use it differently. Let's talk about practice. Astilbe grows from a tuber or rhizome. In spring, these tubers send up shoots, and by early summer the plant is completely formed. Astilbe blooms from June to August, depending on the variety. Planting. It's best to plant astilbe in spring when the soil thaws and begins to warm up, or in late summer in August-September so the plant has time to root before winter. Location. As I mentioned, astilbe can grow in different lighting conditions. But if you want it to bloom more abundantly and the flowers to be brighter, choose a place with morning sun and afternoon partial shade, or simply partial shade. Soil. This is important here. Astilbe prefers fertile soil with good organic content. Before planting, add compost or well-rotted manure. This will help the plant grow well. Moisture. As I said, moist soil but not swamp. If your plot has very heavy soil and water often stands, add drainage or raise the bed. Watering. In the first year after planting, water regularly so the soil stays moist. Once the plant is established, it will be more drought-resistant. But in very hot, dry summers, you should water occasionally. Fertilizing. Astilbe loves organic matter. In spring, mulch the soil around the plant with compost or well-rotted manure. This will provide the plant with nutrients and keep the soil moist. Additional feeding may be needed if the soil isn't very fertile, but overall astilbe is unpretentious in this regard. Pruning. After flowering, you can cut off the spent plumes if you want to remove wilted parts. But you can leave them. In dried form they also look beautiful, especially under snow or frost. In fall, don't rush to cut the foliage completely. Prune astilbe in spring when new growth appears. Division. Astilbe can grow in one place for a long time, but eventually the bush spreads and may need rejuvenation. If the bush becomes too large and empty spots appear in the center, dig it up, divide it into several parts, and replant. This is best done in spring or late summer. Winter. Astilbe is a completely frost-hardy plant. It doesn't need covering. In frost, the bush dies back, but regrows in spring. Where to use astilbe? Here's where it gets really interesting. Astilbe is a universal plant. First use in shady corners. Yes, this is its traditional place. If you have a place under a tree where there's little sun, astilbe will grow there well and bloom. Plant several bushes in different places, you get a beautiful woodland corner. Second, use as a background. Plant astilbe behind lower growing plants. Its lacy foliage and airy flowers create a beautiful background. Third, use as a solo plant. One large astilbe bush, covered with flowers. That's a sight in itself. Especially if it's a variety with dark foliage like Atropurpurea. Fourth, use in mixed plantings. Astilbe combines great with other perennials. For example, plant it next to a hosta, you get a contrast of textures. Or next to a delphinium, the colors will look beautiful together. Fifth, use in cut arrangements. Astilbe lasts in a bouquet for a long time, 2 to 3 weeks. Cut it when the plumes are fully open. Astilbe varieties? There are many. There are dwarf varieties like Deutschland, about 18 to 24 inches tall, with white flowers. There are tall ones like Fennel or Red Sentinel, which grow over 32 inches and have red flowers. There are pink varieties like Cattleya. There are some with unusual foliage. And you know what's wonderful? Astilbe blooms for a long time, from June to August, if you choose different varieties. You can create a conveyor of blooming, where one variety ends and another begins. That's what I told you about Astilbe. Such a simple, such a rewarding plant. And yet people are afraid of it and pass it by. That's silly. So we've met 3 amazing flowers. Liatris with its little flames, Verbena bonariensis with its airiness, and Astilbe with its lacy elegance. All 3 are plants that don't require complex care, but give huge returns in terms of beauty. Why do gardeners hide these flowers? I think it's simply ignorance and stereotypes. No one is hiding them on purpose. They're just less well-known, less common, less visible in garden centers. But that doesn't mean they're worse. On the contrary, it means that by planting them in your garden, you'll get something unique, something that's not found in every yard. If you want your garden to be interesting and beautiful, if you want it to stand out from your neighbors, try planting these 3 flowers. Start with at least 1. You'll get beauty that will delight you year after year. And remember, most importantly, in gardening, there are no rules, no you can'ts. There are only possibilities. If you like a plant, if it suits your climate, if you have space for it, plant it. Don't listen to stereotypes. Create your own unique, beautiful garden. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new episodes. Good luck with your gardening.